Inside the X is a short newsletter every Friday designed to give you some fun right before the weekend. It'll include links to blog posts, articles, books, quotes, and recent purchases I've made. Everything is handpicked to add value to your life. To join, email entertainmentxpodcast@gmail.com.
Good morning, Vietnam!
But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond!
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't fly!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're gonna get.
This is a fun conversation with Mark Sendroff, the Mark Sendroff, the entertainment attorney of Broadway. A few of my other interviews coming up, actually, I brought his name up as a previous guest, and they're like, oh, that's my lawyer. When we were sitting in his office, actually, Jennifer Holliday was across the hall just stopping by to say hello to him because she was in town for a Good Morning America appearance. This conversation goes through his beginnings of interest in law and to the present day. He discusses how he takes on new clients, how he schedules his day, what is most important to him in life, and what he loves about what he does. So, I hope you enjoy this episode and keep on keeping on. We're back with another episode of Entertainment X, and today with me is Mark Sendroff. Mark, thank you for sitting down with me today.
It's my pleasure. I'm always amazed that anybody really wants to hear what I have to say. So thank you.
Oh, no, this will be a fun conversation. I'm really excited to get down to it. I want to start with growing up. What were some of your childhood dreams?
Show business. I just had to be connected to show business. I was and I remain starstruck, and I am a great fan of entertainment. And if there was a way to satisfy that without having to depend on performing talent, of which I did not feel I had sufficient to earn the kind of living I was hoping to earn. And then I found out that there was such a thing as a theater lawyer. And that really turned the corner for me because my parents loved the idea of my being a lawyer, and I loved the idea I was in, fringe show business. So that's a good combo, and it turned out to be just that.
How did you find out about theater lawyers?
I'm glad you asked me. There's a guy named Stephen Susskind who is now a critic. He's an author of theater books, and he was a critic for Variety. Coincidentally, his parents and my parents were friendly. And he, as a young man, worked as a clerk in David Merrick's office, the producer. And he knew David Merrick's lawyer. And so we were just sitting around. I think I was in high school, early high school, and we happened to be sitting around. And he said, "You should be a theater lawyer. That sounds like a perfect combination for you." And that's how I found out there was such a profession. And this was pre-computers, so you couldn't really look it up. So I had to compile a list of potential, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself because then I went to college and law school, but I had to figure out how to get a job.
Right.
And so I used to go to the playbills of all the shows that I saw, and they list the counsel, the lawyer for the show. So I made a big master list, and I wrote to everybody, and ultimately, one guy named Alan Bomser said yes and taught me the business, and then it took off.
Wow. Did you, like your family or your parents or anyone else in law? Or were you like...
No, not at all. My father was in the dress business, as they say. He was a garmento. Mom was a housewife. I grew up on Long Island.
Yeah, Long Island.
On Long Island. I tried to say it right. Did I do it wrong?
No, you did it right. You did it right. We're on Long Island.
Oceanside?
Yeah, I was in
Shore?
East Islip.
Oh, well, there you go.
A little further out, love Long Island.
Yeah, but you passed me on the way to the city. You know? And I used to take a train into the city on Saturday matinees when I was a lot younger than you'd think someone would be allowed to do that. They just let me do it. And I saw shows. I saw matinees. I saw shows in the golden era in the 60s, which was, it sounds crazy, but my first Broadway show was My Fair Lady, which I saw in the late 50s. My grandmother, my aunt took me to see it. So I've been seeing shows a long time, and I was hooked, pretty much from the start.
Yeah. What did your parents teach you about good work ethic?
Well, my father had a good work ethic, and it was always clear that you should be saving money and worrying about supporting yourself, and that was the primary goal. There was no part of me that could ever live hand to mouth. I would have to find some way to feel secure. It's kind of, and I think that comes from their values. You know, they had a nice house, and my father had a good job and raised me in a very admirable way in a great place, surrounded by love and people with similar ethics and values.
What did they teach you about kindness?
Kindness? Well, they never sat down and said,
No.
here's
Yeah.
what you have to do. But by example, they were kind people, and the people they admired and introduced me to all had that in common. I was not raised around angry or hostile or people with agendas. I had a pretty nice upbringing, and I think that I'm nice, although professionally a lot of people think that I'm aggressive, but it's not on purpose. It's because I think I'm saying something that makes sense, and if they don't agree with me, then they deem it aggressive. But I think I'm nice, and I think that comes from my upbringing.
Yeah, yeah. How about relationships in the theater industry? In terms of like professional, it's a small community, so I'm kind of curious what your views are on relationships.
Well, the thing that comes to mind right away is that I'm dealing with the same people year in and year out in terms of the representatives and the producers and other fellow lawyers. And so what I've noticed is that often if a negotiation doesn't go well, that leaves a bad taste in the mouth of the person who didn't get what he or she wanted. And so I find that one false move and you're dead is an exaggeration, but if you have a really rough negotiation, it affects your relationship with that person for many years to come. And it's hard because clients don't really care about what happened on somebody else's matter 2 years ago when the other lawyer was bad. And so, you know, they'll tell me, you're supposed to contact so-and-so, and I'll go, oh boy, here we go. And, you know, that's not really what they want to hear, but, you know, having been around long enough, I know when it's going to go well, and I know when it's not. And that's just something you learn from experience. And, you know, you try to overcome your personal either resentment or animosity for prior behavior. Usually people who say that I'm difficult, it comes as a result of a negotiation in which they didn't get what they wanted, and they thought that I did something that was unreasonable or unfair. And of course, I never set out to do that. I mean, it's a different point of view than the one that I have. I would never enter the scene saying I'm going to be impossible here. It's not productive.
With how small the community is there any like conflict of interest representing one side of a show and then a performer in the show, and a writer and a director?
Yeah, to be honest, that's a very big problem in this firm, no less in this business, because my partner, Jason Baruch, has become a specialist in representing producers and productions, which I have done my whole career, but I'm doing less of right now. And likewise, I represent mostly artists now, you know, all different kinds of performers and writers and directors. And he represents some as well, but for the most part, he's the producer guy, I'm the artist guy, and often my clients work in the shows that he's representing. And so we always have to make sure, first of all, that the clients are aware of that, and also hopefully that we're not the ones that are actually negotiating the deal. There's a general manager on a show, and so often it won't be the lawyer for the show who's cutting a deal with the director, but it'll be the general manager. So rarely do Jason and I get into a room and say, okay, let's negotiate. That's a little bit problematic, but not to mention that there are rules in the Bar Association that you know
Yeah, those rules
allow you to have clients waive their right to complain about that under certain situations, but under most situations, you know, you really can't do that.
Yeah. What were some of like the major lessons you learned with that first entertainment lawyer that said yes to you from the playbill?
His name was Alan Baumser, and he's still practicing. And he taught me that most of what we do is contracts. We're either writing or reviewing or negotiating contracts. So when you have a contract in front of you, you sit down and you must read every word of it line by line, starting with the date. You always have to ask yourself, what if da-da-da-da-da? You know, you need to be basically suspicious of every word in the contract so that you don't look back someday and say, oh, I missed that, or oh, didn't I tell you you were supposed to ... So really, the carefulness that has to be exhibited when you're doing contract work is what I learned mostly from him.
Were there common pitfalls or like maybe like how would I put this? A lesson you learned the hard way starting out. Like, did you ever read a contract and not catch everything, or has that always been you've always been catching everything in every contract?
No, I'm sure that I've missed more than has come to light, but every once in a while, and it could be 10 years later, you find out that, oh, that language really didn't make sense, or oh, there was a typo, it meant to say employee but it said employer. You do the best you can, and I would say that, you know, the more careful the lawyer is and the better at that, that's the better lawyer. And so I'd like to think I haven't missed all that much, but there have been times when something has flared up, and I'm sure many times when it just didn't flare up and it still was an issue that I missed. I try not to do it. I'm human. Doctors do the same thing. It's just you don't want them to miss anything in your health, but oh yeah, I should have seen that, or didn't I ask you to do that, or why didn't I catch that? It's no different than any profession, I think.
Is there advice that you would give a performer in particular when they're navigating through a contract on things to really pay attention for? Is there anything in particular that comes to mind?
Well, no, because performers shouldn't be looking at their own contracts without some kind of representation, manager, agent, or lawyer, who are experienced in that. You know, that's not what they do for a living. That's not what they have the experience in. But I suppose, generally speaking, I feel the same way. Read everything and ask yourself, is that okay? Does that make sense? Do I understand that? You know, and so you can go back to the person that gave you the contract and said, what does paragraph 3 mean? It says so-and-so, but I have to do such and such. Don't understand. Don't be afraid to challenge. That's something that I've learned along the way. Just because it's been word processed and looks like it's a form, or or it's got nice justified margins and somebody else must have signed it because it looks beautiful. Anybody can do that, you know.
Yeah.
And I think today we're so used to looking out for viruses and hacking, you know, that you do tend to, when something doesn't look quite right, then you start to study it. Oh, that domain name isn't exactly right there. You know, so I think we're a little bit more suspicious these days because we have to be dealing with all the technology. But I would say an actor who's unrepresented and looking at a contract, do the best you can, be careful, and don't assume that just because it's there, it's acceptable. Everything's negotiable, is really.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Is there a certain headspace you get yourself into, or mental state before you go into negotiation or contract? Is there a way you approach each particular client or situation?
I can't say there's one rule for all of that. I think that if I know going in who the players are, then I will know how to modify my behavior accordingly. Sometimes if I don't know the other adversary, I have to be very straight-laced and formal and lawyer-like. And other times I'm walking in, you know, to a meeting with friends, and I can be sarcastic and I can be humorous, and we can all enjoy ourselves because we all know what the bottom line is.
Yeah.
So it depends on the persons. Okay. And that's what's good about our business. My business is that it's a small community, and you get to know so many people that way. And so going into that meeting, you can guess what to expect.
Yeah. I'm so curious, throughout your whole career working on and I'm like just looking at all of these posters in this room from all of these shows, is there I imagine you're proud of all of it, but is there any that stand out in particular that you have great pride for, on something that you kind of like fought for and won, or some sort of like negotiation that kind of stands out in your mind?
That's a good question. I think probably if I had to think of a show that I'm most proud of and to have been connected to, it would be Hairspray. Because the writers, Mark Shaman and Scott Whitman, were two of my very earliest clients and trusted me very early in my career. I was practicing about 2 years, you know, before they asked me to do something. And that really is, although both of them are having illustrious careers, Mary Poppins Returns movie is coming out, and they wrote the score to that and the songs, and they're going to be, you know, just huge as huge can be when this happens, because I've seen the film. Digressing, back to Hairspray. When that happened, it was a pretty perfect show and a pretty magical experience. They won the Tony, they won the Grammy, they were a hit, many companies, and it was the first time I was really wrapped into something that large. Another show that comes to mind is a show called Forever Plaid, which is an off-Broadway review, and Stuart Ross created it. And he was a friend and a client, and I remember the day he came to the office and he said, you know, I want to do a musical featuring the catalog of the early 60s, like that Perry Como type with the four singers, a cappella singers, the high-lows. That I like to do that kind of a catalog, and that's very much where I live musically anyway. And so I said, oh my God, that sounds great. And then that turned into a huge franchise business, which was very good to me and my firms. And I love the show, and I love Stewart, and so that's a second one. The Forbidden Broadways, I've been very proud of. I've represented Gerard Alessandrini through many of those editions, culminating in Spamilton, which is just hilarious and brilliant. So it's nice affiliation there. And Jason Robert Brown and Andrew Lippa are two very close friends with shows that I just I admire so much. They're just, last night I went to a benefit for the Brady Foundation where they were honoring Jason Robert Brown and his wife Georgia Stitt. And Jason got up and sang two songs, one about hope and one about guns. And, I just sat there, and I was really having one of those moments. I was sitting like at a table right next to him, and he was being honored, and his brilliant talent had produced these two songs that moved this entire non-show business audience because of the messages and what he chooses to write about. And I'm Jerry Mitchell is a client, an old friend of mine, back to my early days, and to watch him go from chorus boy to associate choreographer of that show Grease, when Rosie O'Donnell and Sam Harris and Billy Porter, that wonderful production. Then all of a sudden he was choreographing, and then including Hairspray. But then he started to become a director, and then he did Legally Blonde, and then Kinky Boots. That was a magical experience for me, because Stephen Aremus, another favorite client, is a music supervisor, arranger, orchestrator, and he had never worked with Jerry, who directed and choreographed it, and they both won Tonys, and here I was, my two buddies had just created this landmark thing. So it happens often. I can't pick just one.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it. Do you get to see theater a lot? Do you see
Yes.
theater every week?
Yeah, more than that. Yes.
Every day, twice a day. No,
A couple of times a week, I'm usually seeing some kind of a show, and I do
Yeah.
a lot of work in cabarets and concert artists. And what I love to do is go home and watch Netflix, but
Yeah.
I'm out most of the time seeing clients work.
It's a busy life here. Is there something at this point in your life, is there anything you're working into, like a new foray or a new category or a new section of entertainment law, or anything that you want to explore that you haven't explored already?
A little more free time would be
Okay.
the goal. No, I can't say that. I mean, I'm not that academically oriented. I'm not busy reading cases and learning about new media. I'm sorry to admit it, but that's just not who I am. I have enough going on in my practice and in my life to satisfy me. And of course, I keep up with what I need to keep up with, but it's not all that different.
Yeah. Have you gotten better at saying no to things?
Yes, I've gotten more confident, and I think and I rely on. Please understand that if I do this for you, I have other clients who will want me to do that for them, and I just don't have another minute in my day to devote to that. Most people want me to help them find work or find homes for their projects. I mean, that's what they would ideally like from their friend or lawyer, Mark. And sometimes I've been in the right place at the right time. I've heard of an opportunity. I've made a call, and something has happened from it. And I couldn't be prouder. But I do say no very often to people who say, "Will you find me an agent? Will you submit my script? Would you like to produce this? Can you manage me?" There's just so many hours in the day, and I can't. And I can't set a precedent because too many people in my life know what I'm doing.
And then they'll find out.
And they all talk.
They all talk. How has your approach to your work, changed since you started to present day?
Well, let's talk about how the work has changed that way.
Great.
When I started, we were using carbon paper. I guess there was a Xerox, but there was, no email, no computer, no fax. And so I would, when you did a will, you could not, when you typed a will, you could not make a single error. You couldn't use correct to type to back up to make the error, because there could always be a challenge. Oh, someone changed that when the will was being probated. So you would have to type an entire page of a will and not make a mistake. Otherwise, you started over. It was unbelievable. Yeah. And then it got a little better because you could cut and paste. So you could do a half a page and a half a page and put a piece of Scotch tape across it and Xerox it and lighten the Xerox so that on that page it looked like you had not made a mistake. So then came the word processor computer, and it got much better. But I would get a contract to look at, and I would make notes, and I would type a letter, "Dear sir, here are my comments to your contract," and I would mail it, and then it would take 2 or 3 days, and then that person would write me back. And so, I could lose a week at best from the time I start to work on something. Now it takes 30 seconds. Now you send it, bang, and they look at it, it comes back to you, bang. So, there is so, I know it's more productive and I know it's more lucrative, but it's crazy. It's like a boomerang. Everything you think you've just accomplished and gotten off your desk flies back at you 5 minutes later. So it really is very stressful, and that's an entirely different skill set that a lawyer needs. Yeah. I'm pretty amazed that everybody in this world knows how to type. When I was growing up, I was in high school, I took a typing class and I became a really good typist, and I was thinking, this is a skill that I'm going to have for my whole life. I'm really impressed with it. Now, everywhere you walk, everybody is busy on the iPhone and everybody is busy typing on their computer. Everybody knows how to type. It's shocking. It used to be a skill that separated the men from the boys. If that expression is still permissible.
Yeah. Okay, so then do you have, with this whole email situation and everything, do you have like rules for yourself? Like you don't check email after a certain hour or before a certain hour in the day?
No.
Or you're just working?
I'm on it the whole time. I don't say that I respond all the time, but I'm always looking to see if there are fires that need to be put out. I have too many clients that have, urgent needs that I can't just turn it off.
No. I'm kind of curious, when do you and a new artist get together? Is that like an organic situation that you meet through a friend? Is it usually formal?
They usually have a need. Either they want to be introduced to agents or representatives, or they want to be told what to do, how to file a copyright form, or how to submit something, or am I allowed to do a play that's based on this property, etc. So the need comes about when it comes about. And also there's a money issue. A lot of artists don't want to spend or don't have the money to spend, and so they don't feel that they can bring someone on their team who needs to get paid. And unfortunately, that's the way of life.
Yeah. So how about within television and film? When would a creator approach you to be represented? Because I know that certain networks a lot of networks won't look at stuff because they don't want to be like the Twister situation with the movie. They don't want a lawsuit.
No unsolicited materials. And so often I will write a letter because from an agent or a lawyer, they will accept the solicitation. So if it's an ongoing client, or a friend, or the son of a friend's neighbor, or somebody who needs something. And it really is just as simple as, my client so-and-so has asked me to submit this for your consideration. Thank you. I'll do that from time to time. But that's often the first time, that I'll meet a client, is they'll need somebody to stand up for them. Or somebody will say, I've been offered a job and I don't have anybody to negotiate the deal. Will you do that for me just on a one shot? I know it's not, you're not an agent, but and I do negotiate a lot of deals like an agent would. Just I don't take responsibility for securing the employment, because you need to be licensed to do that.
Right. Okay, this is so interesting to me. This is this is a whole side of the industry that is like not so talked about.
I hope the listeners could care. I'm glad you're having a good time. I'm having fun.
I'm fascinated. Okay. So then, are there standout moments in your mind of, like, for instance, some of these shows have songs or just even content from previous films that they've turned into musicals.
Yes.
So you have to sometimes, and I mean, tell me if I'm wrong, have to go into the archives or check with movie houses and see if the rights are available for certain theatrical endeavors?
Well, it's a little simplified. What I do, and what a big part of my practice is clearing rights, acquiring options to adapt an existing work, a movie, a book, into a stage production, usually musical. So, so-and-so, now so many shows are based on movies that people call me all the time. Oh, this would make a great movie. Can you get the rights? And so we spend a lot of time trying to acquire rights that turn into musicals.
How do you start your day?
I get up in the morning and I go to the gym in my building and do some stretching, and then I come back upstairs and I have a little breakfast and shower and get the hell out of there. I watch Good Morning America, and I'm here by about between 8:30 and 9. But I'm checking, even then, I'm checking the emails at breakfast, what happened overnight, It's just, it's an ongoing thing.
Yeah. Is there a way you keep yourself centered? Do you meditate, or is it just, it's work,
I
work,
wish
work,
I
work, work?
could.
Yeah.
I like watching television. That's the thing that actually relaxes me the most. But I'm not a terribly anxious guy. And even though I have a big workload, it doesn't feel that stressful to me most of the time. So, no, I really wish I could get into meditation. I tried it, and I wasn't successful, and I'm sure I'll go back to trying again. Do you? Do you say that because that's what you do?
Yeah, well, yeah, occasionally. I mean, it's not an everyday thing for me, and it's through different activities. Sometimes it's through cooking or something that, like going to the gym for me is a form of meditation. I'm not on my phone or anything like that, so that's why it's an interesting balance.
I'm usually not there that long to take a phone call.
The honesty. What? Okay, so what's your definition of success?
Enjoying the way you make your living and having good health.
Yeah. I agree with that. I do agree with that. How about your view on happiness? What do you view?
Everybody should have some.
Everyone should have some.
I mean, you look for it and you strive for it. And if you're not getting it, you try and figure out how to change that.
Yeah. Has there been any changes in your life to increase positivity, decrease negativity in terms of happiness?
I'm not a negative person. People call me Pollyanna since I'm a little kid. I'll say something and say, "Oh, you're so Pollyanna." So I'm by nature, I'm a positive person. I have my disappointments and I have to overcome them from time to time, but basically I'm pretty consistently happy and enjoying my life.
Yeah. Now I want to break down. I want to get a little bit deeper, if you're willing, into contracts negotiation, what you do, if you're willing, because I want to ask you some they're going to be larger questions with a lot of answers, but it's what you're willing to share. What are some of the, how do I put this? What are some of the important factors that go into creating a contract? So do you create contracts, or you're only what are some of the, is there a template for you, or is it different each time?
Depending on what you need. Now, for example, I was just talking about acquiring the right to turn a movie into a Broadway musical. And so there are forms that are traditionally used. If it's up to me to prepare that form, if I represent the movie or the book that someone else is going to musicalize, then it's my responsibility to come up with a form. And it's a form that I've developed over a period of time, looking at other forms or going back and forth, or that another lawyer in my firm has developed. But we all have the go-to boilerplate, let's start with this form, and then you have to tailor make it and carefully insert all of the issues that are specific to this project. And then sometimes you just have to start, dear so-and-so, and then, this shall, when signed by you, this letter shall be a valid and binding agreement. One, you hereby agree to, and then you really have to do it from your head. If it's not a standard situation, or if it needs to be so tailor-made that it's easier to start from scratch than to start to scratch out every line of a prior form.
Yeah. Are there, so then, and I know we kind of touched on this already with human error, being a human. Are there any mistakes that have proved essential in learning in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I can think of one. It goes way back. I was representing a production, and the producer secured his money from two guys, three of them sitting around a round table. Oh, I'll produce it, and I'll write it, and I'll give you my money. And so I prepared a joint venture partnership agreement that said exactly that. So and so is going to do this, and such is going to do that. And everything went really well until an investor, I believe, was unhappy with the investment. and somehow reported to the Attorney General, who was in charge of theatrical offerings, that looking for the papers, did we register to secure, to sell securities. And at that point, I was called down to the Attorney General's office to discuss the situation, and I learned that even if two people sitting together, one of them says, do you want to put up the money for this? I'll do this. That constitutes an offering, and that means that you have to comply with securities laws. You can't just sit around a table and sign an agreement. There has to be an agreement that has specific provisions in it, and the investor has to have certain qualifications in order to avoid a larger filing. So it never occurred to me that would constitute an offering, and that was something I did that could have wound up in a malpractice situation. It's up to me to have known that. It was many years ago, and everybody's dead, and I hope they're not listening, whoever's part of it. But that was a bad thing, and stuck with me, obviously, for many, many years.
Yeah.
Sometimes something seems as clear as can be to you, and somebody else challenges you and said, don't you know about this case or that law or that situation? It's very hard to stay on top of all of it. So, there are situations that can blow up like that.
Yeah. Has this job taught you a lot about trust or lack of trust or trust otherwise?
Well, it's a big responsibility knowing that I'm being trusted and that deals can fall apart if I don't do it properly, or if I'm too angry that I didn't get it to be the way I want it to be, and I tell my client, you know what, let's just tell him we're walking away, and if you got the stomach for it, because you may wind up not having this job, but it's outrageous that you're not being offered ... And that's a lot of trust, because when I do this all day long for a variety of people, and I'm just sitting behind my desk and saying yes, no, no, yes, no, yes, and there are people, each one of these projects, they're putting their whole life into it. They're desperate. If I say no, you can't take this. This is a bad person to work for, and then that's easy for me to say, but that's the only job offer that they have, and so I have to really take seriously the kind of flippant advice that I'm likely to give based on emotion. I have to put myself into their eyes. I have to say, listen, I think this is bad, 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 but I know you. You don't want to let this go. I just need for you to know, with your eyes open, you're walking into something that isn't what I want it to be.
Does that come from your gut? Or is there current legality in the contract? You're like, this just doesn't look.
Well, it's both. The gut part is who I've dealt with and how they're behaving and who they've hired to represent them, and just a general vibe. That's the gut. The contract is the contract. And if I say, you're a conductor and you're entitled to have house seats to every performance that you're conducting, and the producer says, no, you're in a general pool and it's first come, first serve, and we'll try to take care of you, but no promises. Well, then, that bothers me. But the client has got to decide, am I going to walk away because they're not going to give me access to house seats, which for your listeners means the ability to buy great seats for every performance of a show at box office prices. And that's given to the artists, to the actors, the director, the designers. People who work on the show have that advantage. And when you're working on a show like Hamilton, let me tell you, I spend a good deal of my day assigning those rights to the people that my clients have sent my way to get tickets, and to other people in my life that I want to be able to help. And so there's a lot of extra thinking that goes into every part of the job.
Have you made some pretty incredible friendships in this career?
Well, yeah. The interesting thing to me, I don't know how many people in this world would take as much satisfaction as I do, but as a kid growing up, I had certain idols, and I wrote an article recently for a paper, and the headline was, I went to law school to meet Steve and Edie. And the truth is that I was enamored with Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet as a kid growing up, and Rosemary Clooney was another one, and Anita O'Day. That was the world of music that I lived in, as I was growing up. Yeah. And I ultimately came to represent all of these people.
Wow.
And that really flips me out. I mean, I can't believe that my idols would call me in the morning and, talk over coffee and what happened with their kids and what do you think of that, and should I sing this song and what do you think of that arranger, and holy cow, that's to me that was the ultimate. I know that's highly irregular as what someone would tell you how they achieve their goal, but that was, as I started saying, I'm starstruck, and I still am. And the artists whose work I love, whether they're the old timers like I described or up and coming, the thrill of knowing them and being in their life is the thrill of my particular career.
Yeah. Is there a lot of outer body experiences you have right in the office?
Yes.
Just as you're...
Well, weren't you here when Jennifer Holliday just walked out?
I was.
Jennifer was, and I've been with her since Dreamgirls. We've been together a long time, but she lives in Atlanta. I don't see her that much. She called me last night and said, I'm on Good Morning America tomorrow. I'm going to come say hi. And, in she walks, and we sit there, and, and I'm waving to her while you and I are recording this, and that flips me out. Still, she stays with me when she's in town, and I have a big poster of her in her room, and she calls it the Jennifer Holliday Suite.
I love it.
It's too crazy. But I'm aware it's very specialized to me. I have I'm enamored with a certain kind of performer, and when I'm part of their life, that does it for me.
Yeah, because you kind of become family.
Yeah.
I mean, they rely on you for...
That's true. And the other side of that is when people ask me, young lawyers say, what's the advice you have for us? My advice is don't take every client that comes through the door when you're starting your practice, because of course you want to build a practice, and so you're earning money and you're tempted. Anybody who wants your services and can pay for it, you take them. But then what happens is you spend decades working with these people, ingratiating yourself, becoming part of their lives and their family, and you're kind of stuck in certain situations because you love them, but they're not earning you money. And so it's very hard when you need to figure out how to budget your time to consider, I have to get this done because there's a lot of money riding on that thing, or that client is very valuable and lucrative, and so I need to do that, ultimate priority. And then you have the people who aren't earning any money that you've been representing for 30 or 40 years that you just don't have the heart to turn around and say, I can't help you, or, somebody else pays me more, so wait your turn. So that's a very hard thing for a new lawyer to understand when they're going through it. They just want to get the money and build the practice. Get the money isn't really the right way. It sounded pejorative, and I didn't mean that.
Okay.
But ultimately, it can cause a problem.
Yeah. Do you keep, is there a cap for you with clients? Or it's it fluctuates?
Well, at this point, I have partners, and so if new business comes in, I can delegate or share the work with the partners. But if someone comes along that has a very exciting career or a very lucrative career, or I'm flipped out about their talent, then I take them. I can't let it go. I can't get used to the idea of letting something pass me by in that way.
Yeah. Where does that come from? Is that a cultivated?
Just loving what I do and loving entertainers. I have clients that are so brilliantly talented, and they wake up in the morning and they can't earn a living. I mean, I get to practice law every day. I can do what I want. But, brilliant performers who have to wait for the tide to turn, or for the representatives to care, or there's a million reasons why talented people don't work every day. And that breaks my heart.
Yeah. Yeah, this is such a fascinating conversation. I feel like we've covered so much already in a half hour, and
Yikes!
The longest
We're
you've
only
ever talked.
halfway through.
No. We're actually coming up on the end here because we got so much done so quickly. But okay, so as we're wrapping up here, I'm kind of curious, metaphorically speaking, if you could put a word or a phrase on a billboard for hundreds, millions of people to see, is there anything that comes to mind?
Enjoy how you earn your living. That's kind of my mantra right now, because I just, there are people who make a living and they take their money and they do great things with it. And they go on a vacation and they buy a house and they contribute to charity, and they're very happy that way. I think it's a double whammy when you can not only earn the money, but enjoy how you're earning it. A lot of people don't enjoy how they earn the money, and I think that makes for a sad situation. I think you just live for the times when you can spend the money rather than living for the fun that you're having and the satisfaction you're getting while you're earning the money.
Have you always enjoyed earning the money?
Yeah.
Like through this work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always did. I mean, and that's the reason why I didn't try and pursue a performing career. I mean, I did some summer stock in law school just because I loved it. But there was never a moment when I said, how, I have to pursue this. It's in my, it's a fire in my belly. That's the only way you should go into show business if you can't see any other way to do it. And if you have the constitution for it, not to build up a bank account or know when your next job is coming. That's a very scary thing that I live with my friends and clients every day, living hand to mouth and worrying, and it absorbs them completely. Yeah. And I don't have to give that a thought, and I think that's a blessing. And I know the highs of being a performer are amazing, but I don't think I would trade that. I'm glad I didn't think I had a huge talent to pursue, because even the hugest of talents, most of them don't have an easy or consistent life.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Thank you for doing this.
Oh my God!
Thank you for chatting
asking me.
with
This
me.
was fun.
This is really great. This is a blast. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Sendroff.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.